Hey, hi everybody. Hello, hello. Hi everybody. Okay, feeling much better today. Definitely got some sleep. The color is back in my face. And this is a good time to start Daniel. And we're going to be talking about dreams, and more importantly, the dreams of the king at the time, the king of Babylon, none other, Nebuchadnezzar. All right? So here we go. I got some rest. I'm feeling a little bit better. So I do want to talk to you before we just jump into the text. I wanted to just mention something on dreaming and why it's important to get sleep when we don't. I don't, especially. More importantly, more specifically, I should say, to me, when I don't get sleep, it's almost like everything kind of dissolves around me. The veil lifts just a little bit more, and I'm able to see things from a very clear perspective, even though it might be influenced with a little bit of paranoia, perhaps a little paranoia. Maybe there's a little bit more fear involved, but it's really because that veil between what's real and what's I shouldn't say what's real, but this realm and then what surrounds us really thins, and you are able to actually get a lot of clear answers and a lot of clear conceptions about what's going on, and sometimes that can be a little bit frightening. So why it's actually important to sleep, and most importantly to dream, I will give you the analogy that I gave you several years ago. So many times when we wake up, right, and we remember our dreams, if we do remember our dreams, like very early in the morning, sometimes they can be a little bit off putting, a little bit unsettling, not really kind of nonsensical, right? They don't really make much sense. So, our dreams right before I wake up, I told you this is how it begins, right? We first fall into sleep, right? We first fall into sleep, and then we get into actually a very deep form of REM sleep when we are first, going to sleep, right? We get into this REM state. And in that state, when we are fast asleep, we cannot be woken. And we go through the realms of spirituality and spiritual nature. Okay, some of us might even be consulting with our spirit guides, with our spirit team, with God Himself, to go ahead and actually structure and plan and just review, I should say review, what maybe your day was like, and what is going to be the next day going forward. It's almost as if every time we sleep, it is like a mini death, where we go back into this very, very high position of remembrance and reoccurrence, and we actually get to review and understand how our actions are affecting the world around us. So after we get out of that high place, before we are to be woken up again, we actually drop lower into other spiritual realms and other alternate scenarios, really, curated by our subconscious. And then we drop even lower, 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 to the point where we are just before waking up. We'll actually drop a little bit lower, like a level lower than what this reality is. And again, that is just a subconscious cleansing. It's to kind of get you prepared from being all the way up to the top and all knowing and all realizing. It brings you back down to this reality and even a little bit lower than this reality. So when we wake up, we're jumping back up in a higher position, in a more upright position than where we were just dreaming. And we actually use what we learned up here, we bring it all the way through these spiritual realms, and then we take it all the way to the bottom and then pop back up with this remembrance of wanting to improve and wanting to do better. So that is the purpose of sleep. We will not remember, many of us don't remember what is discussed, what is planned, what is forethought in these higher realms, and we're not supposed to. We're not designed to really hold on to that information and remember that information. But when we do, it, 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 it kind of translates itself, and it kind of dilutes itself as we move through, and then we end up kind of forgetting, but it's still here, right? It's still here. We don't remember specifically what goes on, but it's still imprinted in our soul conscious, in our heart conscious. So that's the importance of dreaming. So when you don't get that sleep and you don't get that chance to go up there and repair yourself, right? Repair yourself, then, that repair actually starts repairing you now and in real time. So sometimes people can go longer times without sleeping, and they realize, the repair that you could be doing in the spiritual realms is actually happening to you now. So that's why sometimes a lot of creatives, a lot of artists, a lot of bright people stay up late, right? Because they're actually working on their dreams in this 3D reality. So there is a lot of value to it, although I can definitely get a little bit intensified if I do that all the time. I get a little bit more anxious and a little bit more urgent, as you have witnessed. So without further ado, we are going to actually be discussing Daniel, and we are going to be discussing the dreams that the king Nebuchadnezzar is having. He had two dreams so far that we'll read about today, and we're going to break them down in a way that was perceived then, and also how we can perceive them now. So let me go ahead and begin with Daniel. We're going to start out in chapter 1, line 1, verse 1. And it says here, the third reign, in the year of the third reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. So again, this is again talking about that period where Babylon took over Judah. Not only Israel, right? Judah as well. So we're in that time. We're still focused on that time. And then it says here, the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. So there are some Israelites, right, that are very high up in the system, right? They're part of royal families and they're noble. And these people that were chosen were from Judah, and one of them includes Daniel, right? We have Daniel, we have Hananiah, we have Mishael and Azariah. And the chief gave new names to all of these individuals. Again, it's kind of like bestowing a sense of authority over them, right? A sense of control. He gave them new names to match this Babylon kingdom. So Daniel became Belteshazzar, right? Belteshazzar. And then to Hananiah he became Shadrach. And to Mishael he became Meshach. And to Azariah he became Abednego. Okay, so kind of foreign names. He gave them foreign names and a little bit of a switch up here. And he's done this before. I'm pretty sure we actually read about this when we were discussing the Chronicles and the Kings way back when, right? Many years ago. We read about this tactic. So to these four young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. In the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled and he could not sleep. So once more they replied, and I'll pause here. So once he realized he's having these dreams, right? This king is having these troubling dreams, and he was able to remember them. So remember when I told you, you're going to get these visions and you're going to get help and repair and messages, and then right before you wake up, especially if you're not sleeping, you're waking up in the middle of the night, right? You might kind of get stuck in this realm, right? That's going to cause you to wake up and you actually remember, oh my goodness, what was I dreaming about? So he called in these spiritualists, right? They were the let's see how they're described here, because I didn't write it down. But they were the astrologers, right? He called in the astrologers and okay. I apologize. Okay, he called up the astrologers and magicians. I guess that's it. The astrologers and the magicians to try and interpret these dreams for the king. And every time he would explain it to them, they would explain it in a way that there was no understanding. They would just give them an answer of, oh, okay, you know what, you guys, I'm actually going to have to be right back. I apologize. Okay, let me just wait 1 second. Hey, my love. Hi, baby, I'm doing my live. Will you please give me just a few minutes? I love you. Alright, talk to you later. I'm like, oh, I could restart it and just go from the top, because I did want to talk about something else, but like, let me just make it easy on myself at this point. Okay, so the magicians and the astrologers are basically just telling the king what he wants to hear, and they're basically saying that, we can't interpret the dreams, right? You are the sovereign ruler, you know everything, like how could we impose our ideas on the dreams of the king, correct? So secondly, because nobody is giving him sure answers and certain answers, he basically orders their execution. All the astrologers and magicians, he orders their execution. And so Daniel and everybody is in fear, and the people of the king, the advisors of the king, they're all in fear because they're worried that their lives are under threat as well, right? So it says here once more, they said, once more, they replied, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will interpret it. So Daniel returned to the house and explained this matter, that, nobody's telling the king the dream. Somebody needs to explain the dream, but nobody will. So Daniel returned and told Hananiah and Mishael and Azariah, saying, like, what should we do? So eventually they decided that Daniel should try and talk to the king, because he has these skills, he has these wisdoms. And so Daniel actually gets the revelation from God. So Joseph was more of somebody who was very quick. Think about what situation Joseph was in. He was spending years in jail, so he was doing anything, right, to get out of jail, to try and appease the courts and the people, and he was kind of just amusing himself. He was underfed, he probably wasn't sleeping well himself, so telling the dreams and telling these visions would come easy to him. It was the only thing that he was concerned with. He didn't have much around as a distraction. So Joseph was more immediate. But Daniel, I don't know if it was a self-confidence issue or something. Daniel had a lot of wisdom on his own, but he wanted to be sure when he went to the king. He didn't want to just tell the king, some willy-nilly like the astrologers and the magicians were doing. He wanted to be absolutely sure when he went to the king to explain to him the dream, that it was in God's will, right? In God's timing, in God's will, and that it was correct, right? And accurate. So before Daniel did that, the God actually gave him the vision and gave him the proof of his dreams. So once he got that message, it was a true message and a true download, right? Divine wisdom from God. Then he felt confident enough to go to the king and explain it to him. So the king heard that Daniel was willing to come forth with this information. He's like, are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? And Daniel said, well, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he asked about. As for me, the mystery has been revealed to me, not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation, that you may understand what went through your mind. Okay? So, your majesty looked there. Okay, so he explains the dream. He says, okay, I'm going to tell you the dream. This is Nebuchadnezzar talking. So, let's see. Oh wait, is it the sorry, is it the king talking, or is this Daniel describing it? Give me just a second. See, I think I'm prepared, and then I'm like, ooh, just wait a moment. Ezekiel, Daniel 2. Your Majesty looked. Okay, so this is actually Daniel, right? This is Daniel describing the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had without even the king telling him the dream first. So this is Daniel explaining the dream. It says here, your majesty looked before you, and you saw a large statue, an enormous dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest of arms and silver, and its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet were partly iron and partly baked clay. while you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. The iron, clay, the bronze, the silver, and gold were all broken into pieces, and it became like chaff on the threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. Okay. So, before we go into Daniel's explanation, right, we do understand maybe roughly what this statue is, right? Maybe come up with your own assumptions, right? Come up with your own assumptions, and we're going to break it down with two different perspectives. One that closely aligns with what has at the time, and this is Daniel's explanation. And we're going to also look at another perspective as well, which is a new revelation. So, we have here, Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. Daniel's still talking. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings, and the God of heaven has given you dominion and power and might and glory. In your hands he has placed all mankind, and the beasts of the field, and the birds of the sky. Wherever they live, he has made you ruler of all of them. You are that head of gold. After you, another kingdom will arise, inferior to yours. Next, a third kingdom made of bronze will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, as strong as iron, for iron breaks and smashes everything. And as iron breaks things into pieces, so it will crush and break all the others. Just as you saw that the feet and the toes were of partially baked clay and partly iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some strength of iron in it, and even as you saw the iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, so this kingdom will be partially strong and partially brittle. Okay? In the time, endure itself forever. And in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will be set up, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it itself will endure forever. The king said to Daniel, right, surely your God of gods and the Lord of kings is a revealer of mysteries, for you were able to reveal this mystery. Then the king placed Daniel in a high position and lavished him many gifts, and he made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and placed him in charge of all the wise men. So I'm going to pause here, and we're actually going to look at the two perspectives before we get any further in the reading into the second dream. So if you have a moment, I would appreciate it. So at the time that this is spoken, right, the different people that are interpreting the text, we know that it's talking about kingdoms specifically, and it's been made by scholars and people who study the text that the Babylon, right, being Nebuchadnezzar, right, he said, you are the head of gold. Nebuchadnezzar's the head of gold. That represents Babylon and his kingdom, right, Nebuchadnezzar and his kingdom. And then the silver, right, the arms of silver, the second kingdom that comes will be the Indo-Persian kingdom, okay? And then the bronze, which is the chest and the belly, right, the belly and the thighs, will be the kingdom of Greece. Remember ancient Greece? And then the iron, right, and the iron and clay is actually Rome, and how Rome is divided, and that kingdom, as a great empire, the Roman Empire, there has division and strife, but they're very strong, right? We remember the Roman Empire being very strong. So that's what this is talking about. This is foretelling the king, although you have all this power and might and dominion, it's not going to be forever, right? It's not going to be forever. There's going to be those that come after you, right? And that's kind of a given, right? I think a lot of kings, while they may understand that, they aren't so concerned about it because they at least want their reign to last their life. If they can pass it on to their offspring, right, that's even more of a blessing. But he's saying that, that's not going to be the case necessarily, right? at least for some time. But this does take place. We know that this was true. This happened, especially in smaller ways as well. Maybe not even these giant kingdoms were saw then, but maybe there were smaller kingdoms, right, that came after Nebuchadnezzar, right? So something that I wanted to keep in mind, we're going to look at another perspective. We're going to look at another perspective, some perspective that's a little bit more modern, and a perspective that we are able to interpret today. And we are going to understand what this dream means for us today. And I will give you just a little bit of peace here. Where we are in this interpretation, and the other perspective as well, we are the broken. We are all broken all over the floor, right? The wind, right? We're broken into pieces. We've become like chaff on the threshing floor, and the wind is coming in processes now to sweep away without leaving a trace. And do you know what is replacing the chaff? It's a rock. Okay, a huge statue that became this huge mountain, right? And it's becoming currently a huge mountain, and it's filling the whole earth. That is this segment that we're in now. So I'm not going to tell you this other perspective and have us think that we are going through another cycle or something like that. But this is how I understood it personally when I first read this, and then I forgot about it, and then when I read it again, I did leave a note. I left a note in here, and I was trying to decipher, because as I'm reading, I just put my pen and I put an H next to Babylon, right? I put an H next to Babylon. I put an I next to silver. Or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say Babylon, right? I put an H next to the word gold. I put an H next to the word gold. I put an I next to the word silver. I put a B next to the word bronze. And I put a C next to the word iron, pure iron, and then the iron mixed with clay. C, and then we can also throw in maybe an N or an NA for C. So what did this mean? Because I actually took some time to reinterpret. I'm like, God, what did I mean by putting these letters next to these things? Like, what did we mean when we did that? So it's actually, think about the gold head, not just the material gold, but the gold head, and think about what the head represents. So the head and the H stands for our very first and ancient religion that is now Hinduism, okay? And it's the very first, it's the study of the Vedas. The head of us, the gold head, belongs to Hinduism. It belongs to the thinking and the mindsets of that religion, of that spiritual practice, of that way of life. And it belongs to the internal soul, right? Our knowledge, right, has this knowledge of our eternal soul, right? This acknowledgement of acceptance of a supreme reality. We do understand the laws of cause and effect, and then also the cycle of rebirth and a tendency for nonviolence and peace. So that is where, as a land of before time and now, that is where our head was lying, right? In this gold sense of what I just described. And then think about what our arms are, right? Our arms are silver, and our arms are our actions. Because we believe in God, because we believe in angels, because we believe in the prophets, we believe that we use our arms to guide and to lead our whole body, and we use our whole body in prayer, right? We use our whole body in prayer. We start leading with our arms, right? So what are our arms? Our arms represents Islam, right? Submission to God. That's all it is, just submission to God. That represents Islam. And then what is the next body part? The belly and the thighs. So what is that representing? Our belly and our thighs is representing our aversion or our control, right, of desire. And it's trying to, our desire. So we try to tame our wants, right? We're trying to tame our desire that exists in our belly and our upper portion of our thighs, right? Think about what that area is. Okay, this is our bronze. This is our Buddhism, right? We're trying to control ourselves with our desires. We're trying to control our nafs, if you will. They're kind of just like our desires. And we're trying to curb them, okay? because suffering exists, this is the tenet of Buddhism. I had to write them down because just so I'm not talking out of my head here. But because suffering exists, we believe the only way to stop suffering as Buddhists, right, as the Buddhist lifestyle and mindset, is to not attach ourselves to it, right? So that's the tenet, one of the tenets of Buddhism. So curbing your desires, and because suffering exists, we control suffering by not attaching to our own desires and our own wants, right? So that is our belly and our thighs, and that's Buddhism. So now what do you think? What do you think are the feet of iron and clay, right? Iron and clay. It's something that is very, very strong. Iron is a very strong metal, okay? It has the highest melting point out of all of the metals I just had described. It's the highest one. Iron is very strong. So that is our Christianity, right? And the clay is like our new age, or maybe I should say old age practices of returning to nature. That is the clay of us, right? And that's really the foundation at which we stand on currently, now reduced to scattered chaff at this point. But that was the foundation, and it ruled for a very long time. This Christian mentality and this Christian thought, it's still ruling, and it's still a very prominent and solid foundation, this iron Christian foundation, right? And then we are mixed with this clay. We're a little bit divided because not everybody is on this iron foundation. Some of us are more connected to the natural realm. Some of us are more connected to the times of old, and then we're trying to bring that and reshape that into the new age beliefs, right? So that's all of the religions together, right? We understand our belly and our desires and our thighs. We understand our arms, how they're jumping to do good and right action and perform humbly, right? Perform humbly. And we understand our mind, which is this eternal consciousness and this existence of a greater and supreme glory. So we understand that all coming together and working. And so what does God do? He is the one that takes it all down, right? It actually starts at the feet. The rock started at the feet, and it took out the feet first, because if we don't have our feet, we have nothing to stand on. From the feet, everything begins to crumble, and what is left? The only thing that is left is that rock that took it down to begin with, and that is God. And that is what has happened. It's happening. It's really, this is happening in real time, and we are now actually, depending on what timeline you're living in, right? We are now actually these broken pieces of shaft, waiting to be swept away from the wind without leaving a trace. So that is the modern interpretation. That is what's true. I did also want to throw into the boiling points, right? The gold, or the melting point of gold, is soft material. Our psyche, right? Our gold head is soft. We can melt it, we can mold it, we can make it malleable. Silver is even softer, right? Our Islam is a very passive religion, despite what the media wants you to think and believe about Islam. It's a very non-violent and passive religion. It's soft, it can be molded, it can be it's mendable, right? Once you melt it, it's softer than gold, right? Bronze is a bit softer, I would say. It's a bit soft. It can be anything, because bronze particularly is copper, it's tin, it's zinc, and it's lead, and it's aluminum. It's a bunch of different things. So depending on the mixture of all those things and the measure of all those things, the boiling point or the melting point is either very low, even lower than silver, or it can be higher than gold. Assalam. And then we have, of course, iron and clay. Even iron mixed with clay has a very, very high melting point. That is the strongest one. That is the one that is takes the most temperature, the most degrees to go ahead and melt. So I'm not going to try to get into the ridiculousness of paying attention to the boiling points, but it was just something that actually inspired me to start thinking about, what are the pressures of gold, silver, bronze, and iron. I digress. Okay, maybe I wasn't even supposed to speak on that, but that's the dream that I don't know if that was a dream. I think it was just one of those thoughts that I had when I first woke up. I just heard boiling point, melting point, boiling point, melting point, all throughout. I'm like, okay, yes, of the metal, right? Because we were talking about Daniel, and that was days ago. So, anyways, I'm going to continue. I said, stop here. No, I'm going to continue into not the first dream. We're going to go into the second dream. But this is the thing, right? Because Daniel revealed this dream, the king Nebuchadnezzar placed a lot of gifts on him. He had a lot of lavish gifts that were placed on him, and he was actually in charge of all the wise men, right? So guess what this is what Nebuchadnezzar does. Because he had this dream, this guy, right? This is what he does. He makes, instead of maybe trying to interpret the dream just a little bit more with more precaution, right? And maybe preparing for his own downfall, this is what he does instead. He makes an image of gold 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, excuse me. So this is a very large statue, right? A very large statue, some kind of image of gold, whether it's plated in gold or solid gold, right? Who knows? But it was 60 cubits high. This giant idol, essentially, a huge idol. It was 6 cubits wide, and he set it up on a plain of Dura in the province of Babylon, right? And he says here, he commands these people to actually worship this idol. It wasn't like a decorative statue. It wasn't anything like that. He actually commands the people to fall down and worship this idol, right? And whoever does not fall down and worship that idol will be thrown into a blazing furnace. So can you imagine that threat? So of course people are going to go and, bow down in the square when they hear the trumpets, when they hear the music. They're going to go to the square and they're going to go worship the idol, except for Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Abednego. Nope, I'm sorry, Abednego. Abednego. Thank you. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to King Nebuchadnezzar. He says, "We do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand." So of course they're not going to bow down to this idol. Of course not. So what do they do? They're threatened death. They're like, okay, give us death. And we actually are confident enough not even to accept the death that you'll give us. We are confident enough that our God will deliver us from it regardless, okay? And this is what actually happened. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they went into the furnace, right? The king was like, okay, you're noble, you're royal people of Israel. I don't fear your noble royal people of Israel so much as to not be able to punish them. So he actually throws these nobles, right, these noble Hebrews, into the fire, right? The satraps did not burn. Okay, this is amazing. So they came out of the fire. We remember this story. They actually were moving. There is a giant furnace, right? Something that you can walk into. And they could see them in there, not screaming, not suffering, not crying. They were actually to exist in the fire. They were moving around. And then when they came out of the furnace to be like, what's going on, right? Why are these people not screaming? It says here, the satraps, prefects, and the governors, the royal advisors, excuse me, this is the people. I thought they were talking about something else. The royal governors and advisors crowded around them to see, what just took place. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. The robes were not scorched, and there was no smell on them. So this is just a miracle, a huge miracle. And then the king actually then promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So after he saw that act, if it wasn't enough to just hear the dream, he saw that act and realized, okay, these people deserve praise, their God deserves praise, so he went ahead and promoted them. So that is the first example of his dream, and then we just have a small portion to discuss the next dream. And then we're going to talk a little bit about King Nebuchadnezzar and who he is, right? Because King Nebuchadnezzar is the ruler. He's a fearsome ruler, but he also had provided the towns around him with a lot of abundance, People were, for the most part, happy in Babylon. It was a land of like a lot of joy, right, and fun. So King Nebuchadnezzar wasn't necessarily a bad king, but he was definitely feared, and he had a lot of gruesome tendencies, right? So when the magicians and enchanters and astrologers came, he told them the dream. He has the second dream, but they could not interpret it for me. And so before I get into a little further, the king, right? The king, we all like to draw parallels to the king and who the king represents today. But something that I want to leave you with is the king represents all of us. He represents the desires of man. And so something that I want you to kind of hold on to, right, as much as we love to point fingers at rulers and things like that and blame, right, which we are not supposed to do, as much as we like to blame, we have to we have to understand that a person that is pulled up into authority as such a king is actually just an image or reflection, I should say, reflection of ourselves and man's desire. Like, that's exactly, like, any president, anybody who's come into position and power, they are in power because they are actually a representation of the desires of man and of us. And I know a lot of people are getting upset because we see this man who may be in power, right? Or who may be in authority, in a position of some authority. And we see him and we don't see a reflection of ourselves in that person, so we're getting upset and we're getting mad and we're throwing blame. But it's exactly what it is. Like, that is the reflection of a desire, the desires of man currently. Any position of presidency, anything like that, whoever was president was just like is like a copy of what the desires of man were and are. I don't know how to explain that, but that realization did come to me a while ago. A president is a ruler, a king, an oligarchy, whatever you want to say. That is actually just a representation and an image of ourselves combined, and our desires, really, our desires and things like that. That's what that is. So people are saying, no, like, we don't want that representation. We don't see him as ourselves. We see ourselves as opposite of ourselves, and things like that. Like, we don't want this to be representing, and I understand that. I do understand that. But I'm just telling you what it is. Like, they are in a position of authority for that reason. Of course, there's a lot of systemic inner workings to make that possible. But that's just exactly, what it is. So, he has this other dream, right? He has this other dream. And Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, Nebuchadnezzar is calling Belteshazzar. He says, "Chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy God is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Here is my dream, interpret it for me." And then I looked there, and this is the dream. My writing is a little bit choppy on this one, so I apologize. He's like, "Here's my dream, interpret it for me." He explains, this is the second dream. "I looked there, and stood before me what was a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large and strong and touched the top of the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit was abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it the wild animals found shelter, and the birds lived in its branches, for every creature was fed. The vision I saw while lying in bed, I looked there before me. It was a holy one, a messenger coming down from heaven. He called out in a loud voice, 'Cut down the tree, and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves, and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under its roots, and bound with bronze and iron let the animals flee from under its roots, and bound them with bronze and iron. Let them remain in the ground and in the grass of the field. Let them be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Live with the animals among the plants of the earth, and let his mind be changed from that of a man to that of an animal, till 7 times pass by for him." That's 7 years. "And the decision is announced by the messengers. The Holy One declares the verdict, so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on the earth. He and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets over them the lowest people. Let me read that again because I am being a little jumbled right now. The decision is announced by messengers that holy ones declare the verdict, so that the living may know the Most High is sovereign over all the kingdoms of the earth, and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets them over the lowest of people. This is the interpretation, your majesty, and this is the decree of the Most High has issued against my lord the king. You will be driven away from the people, and you will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox, and be drenched in the dew of heaven. 7 times 7 years will pass for you to acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all the kingdoms of the earth, and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command is to leave the stump of the tree with its roots of bronze. What did it say? Of bronze and iron, right? So we know what that is, right? Rejecting our desires, turning to this new age or this Christianity, right? That's what the stump is. That's what the stump is. So the foundation, right? The foundation, I should say. The command is to leave the stump, and it means that your kingdom will be restored to you, that stump, when you acknowledge that heaven rules. Therefore, your majesty, be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to... Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be then that your prosperity will continue. Okay, so that is where I will stop. That is where I will stop, and I will just kind of let you in on the situation, because we see all these protests, right? These no kings protests, and I'm saying that's okay, go out and demonstrate, but really try to understand, what exactly are we demonstrating for, right? We're saying no kings. We're saying, is this no Trump, or are we saying that we don't want a king at all? Because what this is saying here is that the Most High, okay, we are to be actually putting up our Most High as the king. As the king. He is our king. And it's saying here that we shouldn't even use the word king if it's sensitive to some people, but what do we say? The Most High is sovereign over all the kingdoms of the earth, right? He's sovereign, and he is our ruler, right? So what are we saying when we're saying no kings, that we don't want any kings at all, or is it just the current one who is declaring or acting like a king, right? When I told you he's just an image of you, he's just a literal representation of what man's desires are. That's what that looks like. And I don't know if that's hard for you to like imagine or anything like that, but that's what a president is. It's an image of the people that it rules over, or a king or a queen. That's what they are. They are just an advocate for men's desires. So what are we saying? We're saying we don't want that king. That doesn't represent us. That doesn't represent who we are. But by doing that, we're also rejecting maybe somebody that would represent who we are and what we are, truthfully. And maybe people don't want to see their desires lorded over them. I understand, but we have to understand we're talking about the Most High, right? The Most High. So if we reject all forms of authority or rule, we're also rejecting the Most High. So we have to be very careful about that. And the more that we blame, the more it is, the more we hate, right? It is looked at us. It's reflected right back to us. So let's just be mindful of it, right? I'm not saying don't support. I'm not saying don't go out there and advocate, but just be mindful that it is kind of like a little, not, I don't want to say silly, but like it's just kind of like, it's like you're fighting against yourself. You're fighting against yourself. I know that's terrible, and I know we say like, oh, we're nothing like that, but that's literally what that is. The president is the standard of where our nation is as a collective mindset, and our the gross things about him, right? That is man's desire, and that's just, I can't say any further than that, right? But we're saying here, what we're saying is, therefore, your majesty, be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right. We can actually change this around, right? And renounce your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. And it may be then that your prosperity will continue. Because we're talking about the tree has been dismantled, right? And be honest of what we thought about with that tree, right? It is a beautiful tree, right? It had its leaves, right? It's had its leaves and its fruits, and the animals were under it. It provided food for all the people and shade for all the people. We think that that's what that should be. That's what God is to us, right? That is what God is to us. But no, that was actually the king, right? That was the king. And the person from heaven said, take him down, right? Take him down, strip all of its leaves. And what's left is that foundation. So if we, right, as a collective, that image is really just ourself, that tree is really just ourself. So really, if we can work, right, if we can renounce your sins by doing what is right and be kind to the oppressed as a collective, not just the rulers, right, as that person is a reflection of ourself. If we can be kind to the oppressed and renounce our sins, then that prosperity, that foundation will continue. It may be that it will continue. But what do we really want? Right now we're chaff scattered in the wind. We're chaff scattered in the wind. We don't really know what we want. We don't really know what could work and what would be best. So right now we're chaff, and we are looking to rebuild our foundation, but out of what, right? Where is our rock? Where is our rock, essentially? Like if we don't have God at the center and at the front, and we don't have somebody to replace our foundation and somebody to help us rebuild our tree of knowledge and wisdom, right? If we don't have that, what do we do? So I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. We have to really consider, renouncing our sins by doing what is right and being kind to the oppressed as a collective. This is a group effort. So we will continue this journey through Daniel. It's not a long book. We really don't have too much more to read. Yes, it's really not long. Just a few chapters. I think it's only like 12 chapters. So I'll give you just a little bit of time to think, just to console yourselves and to think about, again, reform and change is going to be a very big theme. As we know, we just read about reform and change, and he's having these dreams and what they all mean. So we work together. We have to work together. So I appreciate you guys listening. I will let you go. Maybe I'll call back my husband. Think about it. I will let you go, and God bless you. I'll talk to you again very soon when it is the time to do so. That was a long one. I apologize. That was like almost an hour of me coming on here. All right. Well, appreciate you guys. Peace.